Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you an update on the Kenshi system. If you don't know, I'm currently working on a full tabletop conversion of Kenshi, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the new things I've been adding to the game this time around. First basic thing, I went through and corrected some of the spelling errors and organization errors. This is not the final version of the game, so you'll still be seeing some incomplete things, some filler text, and some other things. Like if you see update, that means I haven't put the page number in yet. But yeah, I've added a few new things that I wanted to tell you guys about. So let me just get to the first one here. First thing I wanted to talk about is just the blue and red shacks, the inclusion of the Pale Landers thing. These are both pieces of content from mods. They're still in right now, but I'm thinking of removing them in the future just because they're not really canon. Or I might make two versions of the book, one which includes them and one that doesn't. So the first thing I've added is pretty important. This is the resting mechanics. So as you're probably aware, in Kenshi, you need to sleep to restore health and whatnot. While resting out in the open, you heal 1 point on all of your organic limbs every 5 minutes. While resting in a sleeping bag, you regain 4 points on all of your organic limbs every 5 minutes. While resting in a bed, you regain 8 points on all of your organic limbs every 5 minutes. So just out in the open, if you don't have a sleeping bag, in actual Kenshi, you can't sleep if you're just out in the open, but in this game you can. You just heal a lot less. You heal 4 times as much in a sleeping bag, and then a bed is double a sleeping bag. Skeletons do not heal anything from these. In the games, when I've had skeletons rest in beds, it seems like they do kind of heal. But I think that might be a result of a mod or a bug, and it doesn't really make sense, so I didn't put that in the game. While resting in a repair bed, you regain 8 points on all of your robotic limbs every 5 minutes. So this is just the same as a normal bed, but for robotic limbs and of course skeletons as well. Bleed damage cannot be healed by resting out in the open, in a sleeping bag, nor in a bed. It can only be healed via medical supplies, so you can't just rest and have your bleed damage go away. And this is a pretty important mechanic, both in the video game and in the role-playing game, because bleed damage will continue to damage you over time, and you could still lose a limb even if you're in a bed, because you won't be healing that bleed damage. Now, in contrast to that, if you have a robotic limb or you're a skeleton, you can actually heal bleed damage by sleeping in a repair bed. That's how the game works for whatever reason, and so that's how it works here. Normally, your character can sleep anytime after 8 p.m., but, you know, your character might, as a roleplay decision, decide to go to bed later, or you have more tasks you want to finish, or you're in a battle. It's more of a minimum than an upper limit. You can go to bed as early as 8 p.m. and probably not earlier than that. I don't know, unless your character's like 75 or something. By default, you sleep for 8 hours, but you can choose to sleep longer or shorter if you want to. We'll get into the penalties of that pretty shortly, sleeping less, that is. And while asleep, your hunger and thirst do not decay. So if you sleep less than 4 hours, or you don't sleep at all, you actually gain a point of exhaustion. Now this is not a mechanic in original Kenshi. I added this, and it works sort of like how it does in 5e, but it's a lot more punishing for this one. Each point of exhaustion decreases all of your skills by 20 until that point has been removed. Sleeping removes 1 point of exhaustion. If you reach 8 exhaustion points, you die. Sleeping less than 6 hours does not remove exhaustion points, so you can't just sleep like an hour and then just get rid of all your points. It has to be at least 6. And of course, skeletons cannot gain exhaustion points. Now this may seem like a big exclusion, and that skeletons by this merit are a lot better than organic races, and that's completely true. That's lore accurate, and I think it's more fun if that's part of the game. However, there is actually a benefit of getting exhaustion points, or being able to. You can choose to take a point of exhaustion to re-roll a check at any time. This can be used for hit rolls, but cannot be used for damage rolls. The re-rolled check does not factor in exhaustion penalties. So this can be used sort of like a fate point. However, skeletons cannot do this because they can't gain exhaustion points. So this is actually a benefit of playing biological characters that's more of like maybe adrenaline, or you could represent it maybe with like, you know, the desperation of being an organic being. Next, I've elaborated a bit on the time mechanics here in the book. Every action takes time. This is the main game mechanic of Kenshi. Achieving your goals as time progresses, constantly threatening you with dying of starvation or thirst. Gathering food and water facilitates your journey towards larger aims. Crafting an item takes time, planting crops takes time, engineering buildings takes time, and traveling takes time. The amount of time each of these actions take is defined in the skill rules. These are near the back of the book, and they just say like how much it takes to do various activities organized by skill. Fighting in battles also takes time, 1 minute every turn you and the enemy take. Now, this is a pretty exacting way to measure time because if you're the DM, you're having to keep track of the turns and all of the time that's accruing as the battle goes on. You don't really have to do that if you don't want to. You can take a more broad kind of approach to it and just be like, well, it seems like that battle would have taken about half an hour or so, or an hour, or however long it is. And then organic characters, again, can sleep 8 hours per night normally, but can choose to sleep as little as 6 without penalty other than perhaps a bad mood. And of course, your character can choose to sleep like 9 or 10 hours or something, if it would make sense for the character. I did a little bit of organizational work here, moved the list of zones and some of the skill categories just to make it, I think, a little bit easier to read. And these are the big additions: the electricity, building, and settlement system. So I've come up with, I think, a pretty innovative idea for how you can track settlements in Kenshi. At least it's innovative to me because I've never heard of something like this before. So what I'm kind of imagining is, in addition to your character sheet, having a settlement sheet where you basically keep track of what buildings you have, what technologies you've unlocked, maybe the people who live in the settlement. Over time, that would, of course, grow or decrease if you get raided. And so it's much like a character sheet. And one of the most important things you'll probably be having on this sheet is your power. So just like in Kenshi, you need power to keep certain buildings running. Some buildings in your settlement require power to be used. Power can be generated by active or passive means. Passive generators generate a constant stream of power, whilst active generators generate power when fed fuel. However, active generators tend to generate more. So passive, you're getting a steady line of it without any inputs, but it's going to be pretty low, whereas active, you have to keep getting new resources, but you get a lot of power for it. As long as the amount of power in your settlement is equal to or greater than the total power requirement of all of your buildings, excluding those which are switched off, everything works. If the amount of energy is insufficient, you will have to deactivate a number of your buildings until the amount can cover the total cost. When switched on, a building uses an amount of energy equal to its energy requirement multiplied by the number of minutes it is being used. So if you have a machine that has a power requirement of, let's say, 2, and you use it for 30 minutes, then it needs 60 power. And that's Kenshi's electricity unit. It's just power. There's no like joules or megajoules or anything like that. It's just power. A generator can only store an amount of energy equal to the amount it produces per minute, if passive, or per fuel, if active. So generators have a pretty small buffer, which would fill up in just 1 minute of time. So if you have a generator that generates 50 power, it can only hold 50 power. So you really do need batteries for the tabletop version of the game if you plan to make a settlement. I did that for 2 reasons. The generator buffer in the game is also pretty small, but I wanted to incentivize people to have batteries because I think it's cool to have like a big battery bank in your settlement, like just this huge building with all these giant batteries in it. It's a very cool industrial kind of setting. The higher up a settlement is in elevation, the more wind it will have, which will give passive generators different ranges of power which they can make. Kenshi's passive generators are all wind-based. There are 3 levels of elevation: low, such as in the swamp; middling, such as in the border zone; or high, such as in the high bone fields. No points for guessing that one. Most zones have some variance in elevation in certain areas, such as the tall volcanoes of Stobes Gandil. Such as the tall volcanoes of Stobes Gamble or the interior of the crater. And there'll be a lot of other like small elevation areas. You don't need to have the Kenshi, 3D world map open while you're running the game. You can just kind of say, you stumble on a ditch or you stumble on a hill, There's going to be like some variance. Passive generators generate an amount of power each minute. Each passive generator generates different amounts of power. Small wind generator makes 15 at low elevation and 25 at middling, and it doesn't work at high elevation. So this one is kind of a stopgap for if you just can't get to somewhere with high elevation, you can still get some passive power. The normal wind generator makes 35 at middling and 50 at high, and it can't function at low elevation. And the wind generator 2 makes 70 at middling and 100 at high, and it can't function at low elevation either. Each active generator generates different amounts of power per piece of fuel fed in. The generator 2 makes 100 power every minute for 220 minutes. The small generator makes 40 power every minute for 220 minutes. And after 220 minutes, one piece of fuel is depleted. And you might be wondering why I chose 220. That's because that's the number they use in the game. Battery banks store energy. Each one can store 60 power at a base level, but there is like a whole tech tree for increasing that because 60 is not really that much. Below is a list of buildings which do require power and how much they need in order to function. I tried to get them all here. I might have missed a few. There might be some mistakes here, so if you notice any I'm missing or any that are wrong, just like when I'm quickly scrolling through here, if you want to pause and like go correct this in the comments, I'd appreciate it, honestly, because it's a lot to sift through every single building, especially for a game like Kenshi where there's some good information, but there is also like a lack of really, really detailed information that you'd get with like, you know, a bigger, more popular game. And here is the tech tree. So I haven't touched the tech tree too much. I did remove a few technologies that were just kind of like things your character probably wouldn't need to research to do. Like I think the spotlights on the crossbow was one that I got rid of because your character can just attach one to it. I mean, it doesn't really seem like you need a tech for that. And also this is a role-playing game, so there should be more of a focus on like coming up with inventive solutions. But I did still keep most of the techs because the vast majority of them are like unlocking an entire new building or something. Researching a new technology requires a number of hours, which can be reduced or increased depending on your science skill. And I've already uploaded a document which describes how the science skill works, so you can look at the document to learn more about that. I'll also be making like a full system explanation once I finish the whole book. Right now, I'd say it's like almost finished, but I just wanted to talk about a few of the new systems before I do that whole comprehensive video. If you're able to find ancient research from ruins, each piece reduces the base time estimate that you need to get the technology by 15 minutes. All this time stuff is really important because this whole time your hunger and thirst are ticking down, so this is just using more and more of your resources. So it's good to have reductions on things. The research materials are used up in this process, so you can't use a book for one thing and then use it again for another tech, obviously. So this part of the tech tree is divided by tech level. As you can see, it's not very nice to look at. There's like rows and rows and rows of stuff here. I'm not totally sure how to format this better right now. I have a few ideas, but I'm still kind of figuring that out. If you have any suggestions, again, leave them below. And, you know, tech level 2, tech level 3, the long one, tech level 4, tech level 5, and level 6. It's not horrible, but it could be better. So then I also have them divided here by type, and these ones are also alphabetical, which is very helpful for me at least because that's how I tend to look for things in a role-playing game book. You got the basic techs, you got the crafting techs, the defense techs, electrics, which is very long, farming, industry, almost said stone mining, that's not a category, smithing, and training. These ones are a little easier to kind of parse. What I might end up doing is just getting rid of the division by tech level. So for crafting and building items, I would love to include every single recipe for every single item, but it would not only take a long time, but it would also be just impossible to read at that point because there would be likely hundreds of pages with every single item's recipe. And so I really didn't like doing this, but I just put a link to the wiki. I really hate saying, you know, just look it up, bro. But in this case, I can't think of a better way to do it yet, other than just going to the wiki and looking up the recipe there. I think maybe in the future what I'll do is have like a second book. This will be like the player's handbook, and then maybe there'll be a DM guide, which will have all the recipes in it, but it's too much for this document specifically. For items which are not craftable in Kenshi, it's best to use common sense to figure out how they might be built. So let's say you have two of your players, they want to build a bathtub. They'll probably need some metal, which would be according to like whatever size tub they're making. They might need some screws and nails, maybe a source of water. And this kind of logic can really apply to anything that your players want to build in Kenshi that isn't included in the recipes. Another weird example I can think of is they want to build a statue of someone. You can probably get an idea of like what kind of size the statue is going to be, how much building materials it would need, what other kind of materials, gold, silver maybe. So you can kind of use common sense to get like what they'll really need to construct it and how much time it might need. And like I say here, it's more important to keep resource requirements within a reasonable scale rather than perfectly accurate to how they would be built in reality. So you don't need to go like, what's the volume of the head? What's the volume of the torso of the statue? It's fine. Unless you want to do that. So the next thing I've added is some more elaboration on distances and travel time. So I did an experiment. I got a character of mine in Kenshi. I got his speed, and then I ran him across the whole world each way. And I measured how long it took in game time, and I used that to get a rough estimate of the size of the world of Kenshi. What I came up with is that the north-south distance of Kenshi is 791 miles, and then east to west it's 893 miles. But if you have a different measurement or you subscribe to a different theory about how big the world is, you can just change these numbers. It's not a big deal. So then your running speed or swimming speed will determine how quickly you can traverse these distances. The maximum running speed normally possible is 44.4 miles per hour, which would be a Scorchlander or Hive worker with 100 athletics and 2 Masterwork scout legs. This means the minimum time to cross Kenshi north to south with my measurements is 17 hours 49 minutes. East to west, it's 20 hours 7 minutes. And for context, that east-west distance is about the distance from Eugene, Oregon to Los Angeles, California, if you're in the US, or like Hamburg to Paris. I also wanted to include some vehicles. There are no vehicles in Kenshi, but I thought that, maybe the players could make one or find one from like some ancient technology or something. So I have a motorcycle or car, basically topping out at 120 miles per hour here. Of course, there are cars that can go faster than that, but I don't imagine that the ones in Kenshi would be very modern or very good. Boat sails at 30 miles per hour. Obviously, you could go faster than that. This is just sort of like a basic speed. And a plane could fly at about 500 miles per hour. So if your character had a plane, they could traverse Kenshi north to south in just about an hour and a half. These vehicles are supremely rare in the world of Kenshi and cannot normally be constructed by players. However, with a masterful knowledge of ancient science, one might be built. Or they might find one as the reward for like a super hard task or something at the end of like a very difficult area, maybe in the Floodlands. To figure out how long any journey will take to complete, use a ruler and the map below to measure the distance between the point of origin and the destination. I know that sounds a little bit intense, and don't worry, there are some other things that you can do that I've included at the end here, but I do want to explain how this works first, since I do think it's the most immersive way to run things, but it is a lot, so just bear with me. You will first need to print out the map, and the map I'm talking about is this one. To print out the map or measure it on your device's screen at a consistent scale of magnification, that's very important because that can throw off your measurements. Now measure the distance from the northern tip of Darkfinger to the southern coast of Fishman Island. Take 791 and divide it by the measurement you just took. Now you have a number which you can use to make accurate measurements of distances in the world of Kenshi using the map. And this is basically just a converter number you can use to get any distance you need. So then in the future, you can measure a distance. Let's say it's 2 centimeters, and you can just multiply that by your number, and you can get the number of miles it will take to get there. You then divide it by the slowest player's running speed, unless the other players want to leave them behind, which is, of course, that's the way it is. And then that's the amount of time it takes to get there. So let's say you're a starting character, Scorchlander. Your speed is 18 miles per hour, as long as you don't have any negatives or bonuses. You would be able to make a journey of 186 miles in 10 1/3 hours, so 10 hours and 20 minutes. So you can also eyeball these distances. You can say half the map is about 400 miles, 1/4 is about 200 miles, so you can kind of just guesstimate the distances using that. Or you can use the average size of zones to kind of get the rough distances. Zones are about 110 miles wide usually, but that varies a lot based on the zone. But if you don't really feel like having a super in-depth travel system, or having the most accurate distances or things like that, you might want to focus more on the story. Then you should just use 110 and then divide that by roughly how far they're traveling across it. And if you want to go super simple, you could just say long travels take a week, medium journeys take 3 to 4 days, and quick trips take 4 to 8 hours. I would recommend, if you choose to do this, don't use these exact figures, like make it a little bit different. Copy my homework, but don't make it look exactly the same. Make it a little bit different each time, just so it doesn't seem like it's just a standard number, even though it is. Okay, so that has been my updates on what I've been doing with the Kenshi system. I'm still working on it, getting everything perfected and ready for the final release, or the next big release that is. Maybe I'll add more to it in the future. I don't know yet. So as you could see there, I'll just bring this up again. I have a few items that I'm hoping to get to next. I'm implementing weather mechanics and an encounter sheet, some more death mechanics. I'm going to make a character sheet for it. And you know what I've forgotten to add right here is the settlement sheet. I'm planning to make a standard version of that, so I'm going to add that right now. This update thing is just for page numbers, because the page numbers aren't accurate right now because things are still kind of moving around. And then I have to update the index with the new numbers that I choose for everything. So yeah, that's what's going on with the Kenshi system right now. Thank you so much for being patient with everything. I've just been working my way through it and want to make sure the quality is very high. So I'll be making a video when I'm done with the final version of the game system. And once that is done, I'll be uploading the new document. It'll probably just be a drive link that you can follow and read through it for yourself. So look forward to that if you're excited for the game. And yeah, that'll be about it for this video. If you liked it, do the things, and I'll have the system done when it's ready.